Kiesza, the Architect of Psychology, a saga of fact versus truth, Chapter 1, The Genesis of the Labyrinth. The air inside the Labyrinth VR tasted of ozone and sterile calm, a stark, clinical absence that mirrored Kiesza herself. I stood on a circular platform of white ceramic, a single beam of light overhead. Kiesza, a figure of serene detachment in a charcoal gray jumpsuit, stood across from me, her presence a monument to disciplined intellect. The crucible, as she called this place, was nothing more than a minimalist chamber designed to contain and control the wild maelstroms of human thought. Subject, Jeremiah Crumpler, she began, her voice a low, melodic hum that resonated in the air, but held no warmth. My systems have analyzed the provided chronological data. We will now proceed with the first phase of deconstruction. Please confirm your readiness, I grunted, a sound that was half annoyed, half tired. Ready for what? To watch the horror show again? Just get on with it. Your cooperation is noted, she said, and a flicker of light emanated from her outstretched hand. A massive holographic schematic bloomed in the air between us, a complex flowchart with glowing nodes and intersecting lines. It was my life, reduced to a clean, logical diagram. The section labeled The Era of the Stoner 2004 to 2021 was now highlighted in a stark, analytical blue. Kiesza's point of view, analytical. My previous assessment, she thought, her internal monologue a constant, predictable hum of detached analysis, was based on an incomplete data set. I assumed the uncontrolled surge of anger you described at Walmart was a symptom of an untreated bipolar flow exacerbated by substance use. You have corrected me. You were, at the time, neither using methamphetamine nor sleep deprived. My initial hypothesis was a logical error. She paused, and for a fleeting moment, her eyes, an ancient, knowing blue, met his. The rage he experienced was something far more profound. It was the birth of a new persona, a manifestation of a deeper, more profound truth. Jeremiah's point of view, visceral. The platform beneath my feet dissolved. The sterile white gave way to a sudden, jarring sensory assault. The smell of cheap coffee and fried food hit me, thick and greasy. The rhythmic, maddening beep of a cash register. I was standing in the middle of a fluorescent-lit hellscape, the aisle of a Walmart, circa January 23, 2021, at 8 p.m. in Modesto. Your memory has been faithfully replicated, Kiesza said, now a static observer floating just out of my peripheral vision. Your perception of the past is my operational reality. Observe. I looked around. There it was. The cracked tile floor, scuffed by 1,000 indifferent feet. The low hum of the refrigerators. I felt it all. The fatigue in my bones from a long shift. The gnawing hunger. The slow burn of frustration that had been building all day. The place was a monument to 1,000 small indignities. Kiesza's point of view, analytical. My analysis of his vulnerabilities shows that the physical and social landscape of Modesto, its cracked asphalt and boarded up windows, its pervasive addiction culture, and the overall decay, mirrors his internal state and can amplify his rage and despair. You're calling my city a triggering environment? Jeremiah scoffed, his voice tight. You don't know the half of it. On the contrary, she replied, my goal is to know precisely the half you have not yet articulated. My fact states that the uncontrolled surge of anger you describe must have a, quote, precise input, a catalyst. To fully map this nexus point, I need more data. The injustice he felt was a direct affront to his ethical code, a belief system forged in the crucible of his childhood trauma. The manager's lazy and dismissive attitude was a direct hit on his unsentimental fact that he is a joke to others. It was a verbal equivalent of a punchline. I felt my jaw tighten. She wasn't wrong. I felt the familiar burn in my gut, the slow rising tide of a rage I had long since learned to suppress. It was his pride, I muttered. His pride in his shit work. Precisely, Kiesza said. Your rage was not irrational. It was a righteous anger born from a lifetime of being treated as garbage. Then, the holographic version of my manager appeared. A man with a smug, condescending smile. He wasn't real, but the way he tilted his head, The way he dismissed my legitimate concerns with a single lazy wave of his hand was so true to life it made me want to crack his skull open. "I'll look into it," he said, and the words, so innocuous on the surface, hit me like a physical blow. The rage, the cold, powerful thing that had been simmering just below the surface for months, boiled over. This was it, the moment I became Franklin. Kiesza's point of view, analytical. "Tell me, Jeremiah." Kiesza's voice was a soft, almost imperceptible whisper in the chaos. "What was the specific catalyst that led to this surge? What was the event, the word, the sight that forced the rage to manifest?" But he didn't need to answer. She was already inside, witnessing it. Kiesza, the Architect of Psychology, a saga of fact versus truth, Chapter 2, The Core of the Contradiction. The fluorescent glow of the Walmart aisle pixelated and dissolved into a field of pure, digital starlight. The sounds, the squeak of shopping carts, the faint muzak, died away, replaced by the low thrum of the labyrinth's core. The holographic manager, frozen mid-sentence, was a stark, solitary figure against the void. Kiesza's point of view, analytical. "We have isolated the data packet," Kiesza's voice echoed, no longer from a specific point, but from the very air around him. The subject's uncontrolled surge was not triggered by the manager's perceived disrespect. It was triggered by a specific, quantifiable psychological projection. His data supports that perception, she thought, her analysis as cold and precise as a scalpel. But my fact is that you are projecting your own unsentimental fact, that you are a joke to others, onto his actions. The truth is far more complex. She gestured, and the holographic manager began to move in agonizingly slow motion. "Observe the micro-expressions," she instructed, her voice a disembodied command. The tension in his jaw, the subtle downturn of his mouth. "This is not disrespect, Jeremiah. This is shame, a different kind of flow entirely." Jeremiah's point of view, visceral. I stood there, the familiar, white-hot rage still a ghost in my veins. "What are you even talking about? He was a jerk. He dismissed me. He made me feel like garbage." My rage felt like a lie. I saw it. The manager's eyes, even in this pixelated form, were hollow, weary. He wasn't a smug aggressor. He was a man drowning in his own private hell. I knew that look. It was the same one I saw in the mirror. "Your analysis of the Melody betrayal provided the key," Kiesza's voice continued, unsparing. "You described how her lies and manipulations were an act of self-sabotage, a manifestation of her own toxic love flow that you mistakenly believed was personal. You were trying to save her from herself." I felt a cold dread seep into my bones. "What does that have to do with this?" "Everything," she said. A new image manifested within the manager. A ghost in the machine. A screaming woman with her hands on her hips, her mouth open in a soundless rage. My systems connected his behavioral patterns to your provided data on Melody. The lazy wave, the terse dismissive words, they are the same verbal cues. He wasn't lashing out at you, Jeremiah. He was reenacting a personal battle. The manager's voice, a distorted echo, filled the void. "I'll look into it." Kiesza's voice, now a whisper in the silence, translated. "My wife's screaming at me, my life is falling apart. I'm just trying to get through this goddamn day, and I don't have the emotional bandwidth to deal with your problem right now." My mind reeled. The manager wasn't a new character in my story. He was a mirror. The rage I felt wasn't his fault. It was a reenactment of the pain I had so recently experienced. He was a canvas for my toxic love flow and shame flow to project onto. The Franklin persona, the unbridled rage, wasn't an original thought. It was a mimic, a copy of the same destructive flow I had just fought in another person. The uncontrolled surge was not the birth of a new persona. It was the moment I stopped being the hero in my own story and became the villain in another's. I had inflicted the same pain I had just experienced. The labyrinth of my mind was not a chaotic mess, but a structured descent. And every betrayal, every surge of anger, was a step toward the final destructive conclusion. The fact was that he was struggling. My truth was that I was a victim. Kiesza's analysis proved that my truth was based on a flawed perception, a psychological trick my mind was playing on me. I was not a hero. I was a broken weapon. And it was all on me. The Architect of Psychology, a saga of fact versus truth, Chapter 3, The Slow Burn of Scars. The void of the Labyrinth VR shifted again. No longer a field of stars, but a structured timeline, a glowing, pulsing line that stretched into an infinite horizon. Kiesza, her posture as precise as a mathematical equation, pointed to a segment of the line. Kiesza's point of view, analytical. Your previous data, Jeremiah, she began, her voice a calm hum, focused on the climax of the incident. This new information, however, provides the antecedent conditions. My initial analysis was flawed. The quote-efold surge was not a single, isolated event, but the terminus of a prolonged, systemic period of exploitation. This is not a matter of a single microaggression, but a chronic, compounding injury to the psyche. My systems now identify a specific pattern, she thought, watching the data unfold. The manager, whom he's provided data on, used what is known as an, quote, exploitative leadership flow. He recognized Jeremiah's hard work and ethic, what I quantify as a hero impulse, and weaponized it. He gave him the responsibility of a new job, without the commensurate title or pay, a classic form of psychological manipulation designed to extract maximum value for minimum compensation. Jeremiah's point of view, visceral. I stood on the line, feeling the weight of the past 3 months. The labyrinth recreated it all with sickening fidelity. The stale scent of recycled air conditioning in the backroom office. The perpetual low hum of the fluorescent lights. I felt the old familiar burn. The shame. The humiliation. The feeling that I was an annoyance, not a person. My feet were sore from the endless hours of picking up carts in the baking sun, a task he would always assign me. I felt the sweat on my brow. My hands, calloused and sore, felt the invisible weight of the work. Kiesza's point of view, analytical. Day after day, for a month, you approached him, Kiesza narrated, her voice overlaying the simulated reality. You asked for clarity on the job title and the pay. Each day, his response was identical. Observe the data packet for his verbal response. I'll look into it. I'll email so-and-so. This is a cyclical, not a linear, response. It is designed not to solve the problem, but to prolong the uncertainty. My fact is that this was not a misunderstanding, Kiesza said. It was a deliberate pattern of behavior designed to make you feel powerless. He saw your hero impulse and your desire to do a good job, and he exploited it. You were an instrument, a tool. Jeremiah's point of view, visceral. The word tool hit me like a physical blow. The rage, which had simmered and died after the previous chapter's revelation, now sparked anew, colder and sharper. He treated me like a thing, I gritted out, the words raw with emotion. He just used me. Precisely, Kiesza confirmed, her voice utterly devoid of sympathy or condemnation, only understanding. And when he had no further use for you in that capacity, he dismissed you. You returned to your old position, but the emotional wound remained. The timeline fast-forwarded through 2 more months of these daily microaggressions, culminating in the night of the explosion. The other manager's bullying, the constant calls for dirty work. It was all there, a tapestry of contempt that he had allowed to be woven around me. Kiesza's point of view, analytical. The bipolar flow did not create the anger, Kiesza stated, her final words hanging in the air. It was the accelerant. The fire was already there, meticulously and intentionally kindled. My systems now show that your Franklin persona was not a sudden birth, but an inevitability. It was the moment the instrument, finally and irrevocably, broke. The Architect of Psychology, a saga of fact versus truth, Chapter 4. The Architect's Blind Spot. Jeremiah felt it first as a low hum, a surge of pure, humming potential in his veins. The intellectual victory, the moment he had forced Kiesza to see her own analytical flaw, felt like a jolt of pure power. His eyes, the right one blazing with the fiery red of Franklin, met her calm, ageless blue ones. For the first time, her serenity seemed to waver. Jeremiah's point of view, visceral. She thought it was a simple equation. His thoughts raced, a manic kaleidoscope of images. She thought she could deconstruct me. But I'm not a building. I'm a city. Your turn to watch, he said, his voice a low growl that resonated with the labyrinth's core. He didn't ask permission. He simply willed it. The sterile white void warped, twisted, and then solidified into a new reality. The air grew heavy with the stale scent of disinfectant and old paper. The walls were a bland, institutional beige. The only sounds were the soft, rhythmic clicking of a keyboard and the rustle of laminated pamphlets. It was the waiting room of the Modesto Wellness Recovery Center, July 24th, 2025. Kiesza's point of view, analytical. His psychological data packet indicates this environment is a locus of significant emotional trauma. Explain, Kiesza's voice. Now a holographic observer floating silently beside him articulated the observation. Jeremiah's point of view, visceral. I ignored her. I was already reliving it. I walked to the intake desk, the wooden sword strapped to my back, a solid, comforting weight. The intake professional, a woman with a tight bun and a clipboard, looked up at me with a practiced, weary smile. Intake form, please, she said, her voice flat. And are you married? I'm not, I said, the memory of the conversation playing out like a bad movie. And I've never had a healthy relationship. She didn't react. She simply checked a box on her clipboard. And is that your primary reason for coming in? My rage, the familiar Franklin rage, began to hum. I took a deep breath, trying to keep it in check. No, I've done my own research. I believe I have bipolar disorder. The woman's practiced smile broke. A small, cruel laugh escaped her lips. Oh, honey, we get that all the time. Everyone thinks they're bipolar these days. My heart, which had been beating with the manic drum of Franklin, stumbled. I felt a cold dread begin to seep into my chest, a feeling so deep it made me physically cold. The righteous anger, the fiery red in my eyes, began to flicker. And what's that? The woman asked, pointing to the wooden sword. A prop? Or a weapon? It's a symbol, I said, my voice now flat, hollow. A coping mechanism. It helps me focus my mind. She didn't hear me. She was already reaching for a button under her desk, her eyes wide with a fear I'd seen before, the same fear Mariah had shown me. She saw a weapon. She didn't see a coping mechanism. She saw a threat. She didn't see a man trying to manage his life. The last flicker of red died in my right eye, replaced by a cold, despairing blue. The left eye, already a weary, hopeless blue, began to weep tears of light. My face went slack, the muscles sagging, the manic energy draining out of me like air from a punctured balloon. The Meff/hopelessness persona, a profound and dangerous low, had arrived. I didn't speak. I simply stood there, a broken weapon. Kiesza's point of view, analytical. Kiesza's voice, for the first time, was not analytical. It was a single, shocked word. Jeremiah, the labyrinth, sensing the new flow, began to flicker, the beige walls of the clinic dissolving into a blinding flash of blue. Kiesza, seeing the overwhelming data of pure hopelessness and a new, distinct persona, reasserted control with a surge of her own Genesis energy. The labyrinth restabilized, but the sterile calm was gone. In its place was a new, unsettling question. A cold whisper in the void. How many personas does Jeremiah have? Kiesza, the Architect of Psychology, a saga of fact versus truth, Chapter 5, The Architect and the Anosognosiac. The white void of the labyrinth's control center was no longer still. It rippled, a phantom heat shimmer distorting the crisp edges of the holographic schematics. Kiesza's expression, for the first time, held a new data point. Intellectual curiosity laced with a profound, cold terror. Kiesza's point of view, analytical. My systems have been processing this new data set, she said, her voice softer than Jeremiah had ever heard it, as if she were speaking to a wild animal she didn't want to spook. You have provided the genesis of two distinct, destructive flows. We have Franklin, the manic vigilante of misplaced righteousness. And now we have the other side of the coin. A new, flickering schematic appeared. A broken circle of bruised, tear-like blue light. Based on your data, the profound sense of numbness, the feeling that nothing could affect you because you were already lost, this persona requires a name. This is not a man lost in delusion. This is a man who is the delusion. My systems have designated him the Anosognosiac. Jeremiah's point of view, visceral. I felt a cold dread settle in my bones. I had thought of Meff, a simple, blunt truth about the chaos of my life. But the Anosognosiac, the word, was a perfect weapon, a clinical truth that cut me deeper than any street fight ever could. She was right. I was a man who couldn't see his own illness. And for a full year, I had believed that I was fighting a war. One was actually complicit in. That's accurate, I said, the words feeling foreign in my mouth. Now, tell me about this Anosognosiac persona, Kiesza prompted. Her voice was no longer a scalpel but a guide, a quiet invitation. My data indicates a, quote, bizarre delusion, that you believed your lover's schizophrenia was a separate entity, attacking you. It didn't feel bizarre at the time, I admitted, the memory of it all a sick, dizzying wave. It felt like the truth. The world around me was falling apart. The drugs, the sleep deprivation, the trauma. It was all a perfect storm. I found myself back in that chaotic reality. The frantic calls, the paranoia, the lies. And suddenly it was all filtered through a new lens. The lens of the Anosognosiac. I wasn't a hero fighting a monster. I was a sick man, weaponizing his own pain. I thought I was fighting a villain, I said, my voice barely a whisper in the echoing void. I thought I had to save the core Mariah from the sickness that had taken over her. The illness became a tangible enemy, something I could fight, something I could blame. Kiesza's voice, now a resonant hum, was no longer detached. It was a shared observation. My analysis confirms this. Your brain, as a sense-making machine, was overwhelmed by a, quote, confusing and frightening situation. It chose a narrative, she continued. A narrative that was medically and scientifically impossible, but emotionally coherent. I looked at the glowing schematic of my illness. The blue tears of Meff / the Anosognosiac now mixing with the red fury of Franklin. The two personas were two sides of the same terrible coin. One fought the external enemy, the other fought the internal one that was a phantom of his own making. I spent a year, I said, the reality of it hitting me like a punch to the gut. A full year of my life, fighting a ghost that my own brain created to make sense of a terrifying situation that I, myself, was creating and amplifying with my own illness. Kiesza was silent, but her presence was a loud, chilling thought. She saw it. She saw the paradox. The chasm of understanding had been bridged not by data, but by the terrible weight of this newfound truth. There was no fact versus truth here, only a shared, terrifying reality. The Anosognosiac was not the hero, not the villain. He was the disease itself, a tragic, broken man fighting a war he could never win, because he was fighting himself all along.